The bottom line is construction costs are too high. We're in the midst of one of the greatest leasing booms that we've experienced in 30 years because you had COVID knock various businesses out. You've had subsequent bankruptcies of retail. And that's the highlight that I think a lot of people take away. Oh my gosh, retail is struggling. But the reality is,
Evan Lyons is a top producing commercial real estate broker and senior director at Encore Real Estate Investment Services, where he has closed over $250 million of property on behalf of his clients in just a few short years.
A frequent speaker and contributor to top trade publications, Lyons is a recognized leader in real estate investment and retail trends, in addition to being an active member in major industry organizations, such as the Urban Land Institute Michigan chapter and the International Council of Shopping Centers.
In addition to servicing his clients, Lyons manages his own robust commercial real estate portfolio that consists of private storage, mobile home, hotel, and industrial property.
How's the pandemic reshaped the way that people think about commercial spaces?
retail through the pandemic flushed out businesses that already had probably bigger issues. To me, negotiating is two key components: control and leverage. We're going to have very transparent conversations about where I think the property is going to trade.
Anything that you would have done differently, or anything you feel like you did really well that most people don't do well?
Consistency. Learn to become numb to some of the deal pain along the way.
What does success feel like to you, not just in numbers, but like in a personal level?
The thing that I love about this business and where I exist in life is
Hey guys, I'm James Danley. Welcome back to the Bulldogs podcast. Today I'm sitting down with a good friend of mine, Evan Lyons. He is a top producing commercial real estate broker, a very different industry than I'm in the residential space, but he sold over $250 million worth of commercial property in the last couple of years, has a ton of high net worth clients. His niche is in retail shopping centers, but he has done a ton in the space. He managed a portfolio of over $350 million property in Northern Ohio, and he's been an investor for years. He owns storage, mobile home communities, hotel, and industrial. So hopefully you guys get a lot out of this one. Evan, what's going on, brother? Good to have you, man.
how are you?
Good. It's good to finally sit down and chat about the differences in our industries. Everyone thinks that real estate's the same, and yet there's so many different niches that you can go into in this space. So it's fun to talk about those differences.
Well, I appreciate the intro. You know how to prop a guy up.
Friday tries too, man. You get good credibility. So I think the way to start this would kind of be for the audience is like, how did you get into the real estate space to begin with? Like, how did that occur? How did you end up picking commercial real estate as a lane? Because there's so many different niches, and what helped you make that decision? So a little bit about you, man, to start. Where'd you grow up and how'd you end up in real estate?
Southeast Michigan. Went to Central Michigan University. Wanted to be a lawyer my whole life.
You look like an attorney today with the suit check.
It's, you know what? It's it was the gift of gab. It was something my parents told me from, the time I was young. Like when they would disagree, for example, damn it, you're going to be a lawyer. Wanted to do it forever. That was the pursuit. Jumped into a real estate program at Central Michigan, one of only two in the country at the time. University of Wisconsin-Madison had a real estate program. Central Michigan University had a real estate program. It was a cool deviation to make yourself look good getting into law school. But fast forward 3 years, by my junior year,
I didn't even know that the most colleges had like real estate programs.
They don't,
because they didn't provide that at any of the universities I went to.
Yeah. So this was a finance degree, but it was finance in real estate and development.
Really?
So we got to skip a bunch of the crappy, deep accounting ones, which are probably pretty valuable, but and instead jump more into full-blown capstone analysis on redevelop this distressed hotel post-2008 or build new, and what that looked like. And we spent like weeks analyzing it.
That's awesome.
I wish I didn't just do things for a test and then forget all of them. Uh, I should have gone to college as a more mature person, but incredibly valuable program, very cool, valuable to me especially because
So wait, how many classes did you have in that space? Like that was
you get your basic out of the way year 1 and year 2, right?
Yeah.
Biology and anything like that. Thereafter, it is every class we were in was about real estate.
Wow,
Real
that's
estate
awesome.
accounting, real estate finance, development. And this is in a post-2008 crash world. I graduated college in 2012. And so in the thick of it, we were analyzing stuff real time that these are actually Harvard case studies. So the leader of this program is Dr. Corcoran, is this phenomenal person. Had no business teaching a college class in Mount Pleasant. He should have been a government official because he was at top tier finance, actually giving out the debt in New York for 100 years. Phenomenally smart, genius, wonderful person. And it was like 20 of us in this class.
That's amazing.
In the degree.
In the program. That's wild.
Amazing.
So when you started that, in your mind, did you like start loving it and getting passionate about it in the classes with the university, and then you kind of fell in love with real estate through that process, or was it after university? Like when you were in the formal education, it was just kind of like, do this to get the degree?
So it was no, it was falling in love through the classes. I rather than take an econ degree or poli-sci to get into law school, this was a unique thing that I felt would keep me engaged and also differentiate me from the other guys who are going to be smarter than me trying to get into law school. And so that's how it started. As far as an affinity for real estate, I had always been interested and wanted to do something. I don't have family in real estate, but I have a close family friend, Ty. So I've been around it in some form of fashion. So I was always interested in the idea that as a developer, your efforts over the course of a few years erect a structure, and that structure, whether business stays there or not, that structure is going to long last you as a person. To me, there's something so infinite about that, which is really cool. So that was route one. Go to college. Oh, cool. There's a potential degree here. And really the kicker was, because I'm business minded then, I guess, law school had never been more expensive. Pay had never been lower. I look at all education as literally a business investment. I'm going to put money in. What access to employment and money do I have and growth? And it just seemed small at the time. So I asked the dean at MSU Law whether I should go to law school or pursue real estate. And he said, at this day and age, if you can do something without taking on more debt, run.
Do it.
And, yeah. Dean of admissions, excuse me. He's supposed to.
That's awesome.
Supposed to tell you.
This is in 2012.
That was in 11.
11.
And then
That's
I was
great
really,
advice.
really dedicated. So,
So that was when you made the decision then, instead of doing a law degree, to actually pursue real estate as a career and
Right then.
go out and start earning income. Yeah.
the drive between East Lansing, MSU, Michigan State, to Mount Pleasant, 45 minutes.
That's awesome.
Quite literally, not metaphorically, rolled down the windows, let the law school thing blow out of the car, and by the time I was back in Mount Pleasant, I was like, I'm going to be in real estate. Let's do it.
Wow.
So
That's
I
awesome.
called a guy, the family friend, and said, hey, I want to get into this. What should I do? And he...
Now, the family friend, what kind of real estate was he in? What area?
Bill Watch, First Commercial. They are a shopping center and shopping center development company and full service. They've had a brokerage, leasing, management, third-party management, all that stuff. So they built a ton of Kroger anchored shopping centers. They own the what we call the shadow anchor to your Kroger right here. A couple hundred yards from us.
Yeah.
They own
Maple.
that elbow. Yep. And so he's storied experience. He's
Development and ownership. So he's been in the business.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
a couple $100 million of good quality real estate. Built a ton of the ground up Rite Aids that are in town. So I asked him what to corroborate my feelings and what do you think? And he was like, you know what, do you want to get your hands wet? Go be a broker, because they touch everything, in our daily transaction. And this more than anybody, we're dealing with the buyer, the seller, the attorneys, the bank, the title company, the property itself, the third-party service companies, a surveyor, engineer, architect, any of those things. And so you get to touch so much, and it's a great launch pad to potentially do something else.
Learning curve is strong. It's fast.
Except so is the addiction, and I'm still a broke.
Although you've dabbled in and out of that space and come back to it.
We'll get to that. Yeah.
Brokerage is meant for some people, not for others, right? It's a difficult game, but it can be a sport if you love doing it. So that was a counsel. That's how you made that transition mentally. Any experience from that you would give to like young guys that want to get into real estate, but they have no idea where to start or like which avenue to go into, and like how you made your decision to go into commercial versus residential or some other niche? And
yeah, I didn't have an interest on the residential side, mostly because the commercial was the real estate aspect that I knew. It's other than the home I live in growing up, commercial is the thing that interacts with my consumer behaviors on a daily basis. And so it was just something generally I was a little more drawn to. And then, we're capitalists, and
sure,
the dollar signs are on these retail properties or other commercial properties are big, can be. And so the sky's the limit. And we can talk about the product type that I really swim in, and dollar amount and stuff, and why. But
so let's tell us about it. So once you made that decision, like what was the first brokerage you went to? How'd you get started? What did that first 6 months to a year look like? Do you remember what your first deal was? Like, how did that process take place?
Sure.
So I'll paint the picture.
Bill Watch says, go be a broker. And I said, okay, let's have lunch. He set me up with Ashish Vakaria.
Oh, yeah.
Tushar, and I probably know Ashish, but he's at Marcus & Millichap, and I interned for him. And back then, that was free intern.
Yeah, they were unpaid.
Question.
When we graduated college, there was no paid internships.
Yes. So restaurant server by night, and real estate intern, databasing essentially by day. The databasing, literally looking up properties address by address and looking through different resources to pull names, phone numbers, and ownership records. These were things that Ashish was directly then going to call. As soon as I made 100 of them, I give them to him. Boom, he calls. For as experienced he is, and mine, now a decade in the business, hasn't changed. We still, a broker dies when he stops cold calling, in my opinion. So that still fully exists, and that's an interesting, to me, like an ode to grassroots brokerage.
Sure.
But a database for him, and then you can only learn so much in doing that, right? Where I learned and got the bug was when he'd walk over and go, hey, I'm gonna have this call, pop in here, and you sit and you listen, and he would give me context before the call was happening. You'd see him just on his game, button unbuttoned, pitching for this deal or overcoming whatever massive objection might have happened during an escrow. And then we'd sit down after and talk about it. And those 2 months was invaluable.
So you did that? We only did that for 2 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
Back to college. So that was Marcus & Millichap here in Detroit.
Okay.
That was a summer internship. Back to college. Okay, sweet. Brokerage. What do I do? What's my next step? I had a tie through Central Michigan at the same firm, Marcus & Millichap, in their Chicago office. He was a Central Michigan graduate football player. I met him through the real estate program. And so basically we found by the end of college that I had the option to jump to Southfield with Ashish or go to Chicago. So one drunken post-football game walk home with my girlfriend at the time, now wife, we sat on the front porch while everybody else was partying, and we pulled out a laptop and started looking at apartments and said, okay, well, we can be pretty broke but save some money and live at home and do the Marcus and Millichap thing here, or we can be super broke and go risk it Chicago. And so I ended up in Chicago we were in Chicago for 5 years.
Oh, you did go to Chicago?
Yeah,
I don't remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And brokerage is no pay, no benefits, eat what you kill. It's
Yeah.
a year until you get your first deal. It's a safe thing to tell most people starting.
Sure.
And so, it created, first of all, what a fire, to be first in, last out, to be super dialed, to do the things that are being taught the whole time, and have that race to that.
Do they give you pretty good like construct support training in the commercial space and give you guidance on what to do, and then it's or is it kind of like just loosey goose, like, hey, do what you want to do, show up or not?
At a place like Marcus and Millichap, they're for perspective, they're one of the big 3 brokerage firms. Great training. They have a 6-month, you're in with like a manager and sort of your class every day. But meanwhile, you're assigned to a senior, and that senior's teaching you things. And so I'm a firm believer that a lot of
Great structure.
a lot of the benefit is who you're aligned with. Is that senior great? Are they giving you the time? Do they want to see you succeed? Are they successful in their own right? And so I was fortunate enough to be working with someone great, George Gaddis out of Chicago. He's a longtime friend and mentor. And we were doing it.
Now, do they give those guys incentives to mentor and help support you in some way, or no? Or is it just like you're expected to give back part of the culture?
Yeah, they don't incentivize you. A senior and a junior agree to a deal.
So you negotiate with him, and then he gets pieces of your deal. He turns you.
Yeah, but as a college person starting out to get a job, maybe we'll talk about negotiation later. No leverage over here. At least that was my perception. It's like, yeah, sure. All this sounds great. Get me to Chicago, right? So, but fair deal, normal deal.
How long does that deal structure usually last for? That's a little different from residential. So
it really depends on the firm or the people. So
how long was yours?
I can speak. Mine was we didn't have a finite number. It was opt in, work together, and if at some point one wants to go in the other direction, that would be fine. I run mine very similar. When I take on agents, we have a set number of deals. That deals or deal volume that we're gonna do together, and then thereafter we'll discuss continuing to work together. And for me, the obligation on my end, in my head, is always people won't leave if I am adding value, and if there's a reason that we are better working together than on our own. And so to me, it's a healthy obligation to continue to invest in my own business that they receive certain benefits from, and or leave access. I have to be available. I have to be there. I have to be on my game and help close their deals. And then those arrangements end up perpetuating longer term.
Are there a couple of young guys that you're mentoring now that are under you, or?
So I've got there's a good broker in Kentucky who's a former Marcus guy and jumped over, Mike West. So we work together regularly. And Joe Lopez is a great buddy. He was a college friend, jumped over in brokerage as junior, and we work a ton of deals together. We've been working together for 6 years now.
That's awesome.
And then some come and some go, and that's all.
Are these guys also in the same niche space as far as like retail, or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we primarily will work the same stuff, path of least resistance. However, we look, if a deal is priced right and expectations are aligned on timing, what we can get for a seller, what the seller needs. If we can all agree to those things, I'll run any product. I mean, we sold a couple mobile home communities that Mike generated down in Kentucky, mobile home communities, which again, you go, how can a guy in Kentucky and a guy in Michigan sell one on an hour south of New Orleans, which is like a couple RVs and 60 mobile home mobile homes, excuse me. We can make a market. It's priced right, it's underwritten well, and we can find those buyers. And so that's what we're doing. So you can go cross product type.
Who's the buyer type for that type of product that's buying mobile home parks? Is it just someone that wants cash flow? Is someone that's experienced in the space? Like who helps in the management? How does a deal like that look?
Yeah, sure. So primarily you're going to find value add investors that are willing to, that are in search of greater yield. And so they're willing to take on more of the management or more a heavy lift on either value add or just the day-to-day management. They may third-party management out in terms of having someone on site, but a good typical private transaction, meaning it's not $200 million to a big private equity company, is, oftentimes some guy is going to look at this park and go, the rents are a bit under market. It's mismanaged. There's 25 dogs running around the park, which scare people away. You can't even get This is real time. And the driveway is washed out and it's dark and kind of scary look at night, so it's hard to push rents and create a nice community for a family who can't afford a home, which I'm sure you can attest to right now.
Sure.
And this is their only direction. So a guy will come in, you can get traditional financing or seller financing, and he'll do simple things. It's spending money, mark my words, but paving the driveway, security cameras of some kind, LED lights, nice signage, removing some of the blight or the slow pay, no pay tenants, or the ones that are problems.
Okay.
Pet service fees, pet fees. It's not just a capitalistic item, but it also keeps the folks out that bring in 5 dogs and don't take care of them. That's not always the case. They're great pet owners, but again, there are things you can do to improve a park some. That as a result, you can put new units on site. You're filling some of these vacancies. You're pushing some of those rents. You're building equity in the center.
Do you remember the numbers on that deal, offhand or roughly? Like, what'd you guys broker it for? What the buyer paid? Like all. So what he put in improvements, and then how much he boosted cash flow? Or
okay, so one we did earlier this year, about a $900,000 sale. So cheap, small town.
This is also out of state?
Yes, Indiana. Immediate value add was through setting up the meters so that each unit was separately metered, and you could bill back effectively every tenant's usage pro rata of utilities.
So how many mobile homes were in that park?
It was a small one. It's like 28.
20, okay.
Yeah. So this individual, I guess long story short, this individual bought it for $900, put about $120 into it, $30,000 on the meter side, which actually effectively adds about $30,000 annually, pays for itself in a year.
Wow.
On utility capture. And then through within that 120 was, again, LED lights and improving the drive, just as we said. So he's got about 100 and is into it for about $1 million. Call it $1,050,000 with some closing costs and such.
Sure.
And he'll push rents, and he'll be right at about a 10.5 cap.
Okay.
From the immediate, he bought it at somewhere around a 8, low to mid 8. Yeah.
So people that don't understand the verbiage for cap rates, do you want to explain that, or what is the overall, like, would the cash flow go up? Like, what was the property bringing in when he bought it? Would it actually go to? So what's used on the improvements?
So cap rate is a return. It's a function of risk in a deal. So the big sexy, a stabilized deal that provides a secure return, long-term cash flow, and absolute passive management, like a Chick-fil-A, is going to be a low return because it's low risk. So a 20-year lease for a Chick-fil-A might sell at a 5% return. Okay, a higher risk deal that requires management or value add, or tenant might leave. You might have immediate capital items or deferred maintenance items. All of those things push the return or cap rate up. And so those deals are 8, 9, 10%. Right now, everybody wants a 9, 10, 11% return. It's hard still to find those deals
because of the inflationary environment we're in, correct?
Yeah. So
everyone's realizing that the cash is devaluing more rapidly than it has historically. So they've got to get a higher return to maintain and preserve purchasing power.
Yeah, or even to simplify it, interest rates are 7%, and someone generally wants 3% above the spread, so they need a 10% return.
Minimum. So with that 10 cap, that the property he's into for $1.05 million, you said, what was that bringing in top line income before expenses? Do you remember or no?
It'd be $100,000.
$100,000. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, somewhere.
Okay.
Half.
Yeah, gotcha. So that's what makes it 10 cap. Got it. Okay, so the audience is clear. And when you bought it, it was probably bringing in $80,000.
It was about
boosted annual cash flow at 20%. That's awesome. Okay, cool. Very cool. So with you guys being based in, this area, it sounds like you broker deals all over the place. How does that work? Like maybe some people would expect that if you're a commercial broker in Michigan, you're selling properties in your region, but you do deals all over the country. How does that work? What does that look like?
Sure. So we, Encore is a group of 30 guys, primarily based out of Southeast Michigan. But we'd sold 2 years ago about $1 billion in sales volume across 44 states. Last year, volume down for most folks or across the industry. I think we're about 600 million. We'll exceed that this year. But same thing, 40 plus states. We have relationships across every state that we are going to operate in that we will bring in terms of licensure and compliance, and those folks are on the deal for a fee to help make sure that we are in compliance. Other than that, we can generally operate in, I'll say all, but most states. There are some that have nuance that we have to very specifically be licensed.
So when you started the business, how long were you under your mentor for?
I was with him for
under
5 years.
Oh, 5 years. Wow. It's a stretch.
Well,
okay. And that was the whole time you were in Chicago then?
Yeah.
So the whole time you're in Chicago, you're working at
together. Yeah, we built a team together of 8 guys and
That's
an
awesome.
analyst. And then, I wanted to move home my wife was graduating PA school out of Columbus, and it was time to decide Columbus, Ohio, Chicago, Michigan, and we planted our roots back here.
That's awesome.
So we separated amicably and still do deals and all that.
That's great. Do you remember your first deal you ever did?
Yeah, it was a Just Tires. So
Just Tire store.
So when you are in a large firm in a big city, and there's a couple thousand agents you're competing against, you got to pick a something. And so I was both someone that focused primarily on auto parts, O'Reilly Auto, Advanced Auto, AutoZone, Goodyear, Just Tires, Firestone, and then in the depths of the South Side, someone along the way dubbed me Southside Evan Lyons, and it stuck for a while while I was there. But
so you honed in on a niche within a niche. Not only are you in commercial and then in retail, but then you honed in on literally like the tire type retail to get started. And that way you build track record in one niche area, you're able to dominate it.
I know more about what leases they're doing, what their rents are, which ones sold, how they sold, who bought them, who sold them nationally than the guy in his own office that makes a lot more money than I do. And at least that I could say that in 5 seconds on the phone.
Sure.
Hey, I know I sound 22 years old, but this is why I know more.
Question from the peanut gallery. How much does like industry knowledge play into like you have to connect with potential tenant? Like, do you have to inform yourself on the business or on like, how do you research and how does that work?
Sure. You can be very successful selling real estate and retail real estate or even industrial real estate and not necessarily know much about the tenant. There's an element of credibility. There's an element of how to sell the deal. But if the real estate, the bricks, the sticks, the location, the growing market is really the driving factor, then the tenant in there is a little less relevant. The leases could be rather bulletproof, and therefore, if all things are equal, a powerful, strong lease that locks a tenant in is all you need to know. However, as you grow in the business, to be an advisor and comfortably put people in deals that you can feel good about, it's important to know the strength of these companies. And so you dig in and on with auto parts, that was my edge because I didn't have track record. So if you don't have track record, what do I have? Well, I know the intricacies of name a clause on the lease. Oh yeah, 27, that's this. I know how it reads. Go get it. And you hear him like rustling paper and he pulls it out and I said, is that clause in there? Yeah. Yeah, I knew that because it's a 2007 lease. This is when it was signed. They were doing this from 2007 to 2009. And right now there's an opportunity to take that clause out and it'll improve the value of your property. Let me come sit down. Boom. Now you got the meeting and now you got some track record. So knowing about the health of a company and their intricacies is a point of leverage, both in earning business, but also in helping your clients make money.
In the long run. So that very first deal you did, how did you find that deal? How many months into the business were you before you got that first paycheck? Because like you said, in brokerage, you only eat what you kill, and it takes a while. You got to have reserves and at least be able to cover overhead.
Sure. I didn't have reserves, and I was barely covering overload. we lived off of Groupon, and back then they had decent deals. And I flew out almost every weekend to wherever my dad was, who was a painting contractor. He painted Eileen Fisher clothing stores.
So you go work with him on weekends and then come back.
I'd fly out. We'd paint the two. We'd paint all Friday night, all Saturday night. During the day, we'd be exhausted on Saturday, but we'd go have some beers in whatever town we were in. I'd fly home. I made rent. So, but to answer your question, about 10 months in, the deal closed. So
10 months in from you starting under Vicario mentorship in Chicago, like day one, you're go. It took you 10 months to close your first deal.
Yes, except in Chicago, I was with the Chicago mentor, which is George Gaddis.
Oh, George, sorry.
Yeah. So, from the time I started in Chicago, about 10 months. So at some point along the way, a couple months in, making a bunch of phone calls, I identify a person, boom, we can get a listing, we get the property listed. It's actually a deal that today I would have bought. There was a thing that we did. We recognized that they didn't have an option period remaining in their lease, which meant that at the end of their lease, a landlord has all the leverage to say you can stay or you have to leave. And their rent was substantially under market. And so to sell the deal, we actually assisted in renegotiating that lease.
With the tenant.
Yeah.
Well, how'd you contact the owner originally? Why did he actually want to sell? How'd you convince him to sell before you end up getting into raising the value and getting the number that was necessary?
Cold calling any and every auto parts owner that has a heartbeat. So why that's why initially, but how we, as they earned the business to get the proposal, tell them what I thought I could sell the deal for, we recognized that there was something to exploit or something to capitalize on for this for this owner. And it was that in 2 years, this tenant that's been there since 1970 is on a 1970 rent, mind you, is going to have to come to the table and negotiate. And so they've
been the same lease for
since the 70s,
40 years,
just minor rental increases.
Wow, that's wild.
These are the types of deals when we talk about what's a good deal. These are the types of deals you look for. That's a landlord that wasn't being proactive. And that's not a knock on him. He just owned it outright, handshake agreements, things like that. And there was, the area around him had grown substantially, and so I think the rent was somewhere around $7
every square foot.
Yeah, and we 2.5 x'd it. We were at like 22.
Wow, that's a massively undervalued.
17. We got to 17. That's what it was.
Do you remember like what that? Because I know that most people don't look at it from per square foot basis. In their mind, they're thinking like, how big is the structure? What was the actual monthly rental income or annual rental income? It's $7 a foot versus when you guys bumped it.
I'll pull this out real quick. Okay, so it was a 7,300 square foot building at, I don't know how I can remember this. Maybe it's because it's first deal, $780 a foot, so $57,000 a year annually.
Oh, so this should just sit on it and get $56K
in the heart of Chicago.
That's not very much income. The property
he owned it free and clear, so he's fine. He's just like, oh yeah, there's residual value in the building, but there was also, because of this, the lack of this clause in the lease, there were no option periods for a tenant, which I guess for the record, an option in the lease is a tenant luxury that at the end of their lease, if they have, let's say, 1 5-year option, when their lease is coming due, they have the first right to come back to landlord and say, I want to exercise my option and therefore I can stay for another 5 years. It's their first
at
right
a pre-specified price.
Pre-specified rent, yes.
Right, yeah.
And so since the 70s, they must have had, 8 5-year options or 25. At some point, those kept, that they added more on at various amendments, and the landlord gave them to them. That's an option period is tenant leverage completely, and it had run out. So if we weren't involved, he more than likely would have just said, oh, hey, your lease is coming due. You're at $57,000. Let's go another 5 years. And he might have even given them added a few. They would have been smart enough to say, hey, give me a couple more option periods, which would have locked the rent in for another, call it 15 or 20 years.
So you took him from getting like $70,000 a year to $250K plus a year?
So
wow, that's a crazy change in value. And it was the same tenant. The tenant decided to stay at the increased rent.
Yep.
Wow.
And so I want to say it was around 17, and that was 7,350. So we took them from 57,000 to 125,000.
Wow, that's awesome.
On a new 10-year lease.
And then you use that 10-year lease to then help him sell the building. Now, why was he interested in selling with the boost in cash flow? Like, why not just keep the building?
Because, for example, at $57,000, the value of the building on its current lease at the time was probably a 8% return, $700,000, $800,000 based on the lease. So let's call it $900,000 for that building. Someone is willing to come and buy that from you at $125,000 with a new 10-year lease. That property doesn't sell at an 8% return anymore because it's not as risky. It's a less risky deal because you have term with a justifiable company that just said, yeah, I'll pay a double rent and I'll sign for 10 years. They're obviously motivated to stay. They're obviously doing well. And so now that deal becomes, let's call it a 7% return, which is $1,785,000.
Wow.
So we created $1 million in equity and didn't know enough to say, I want a lease fee.
So you did all that work just to sell it and get
Correct.
commission on the sales fee versus also getting paid for restructuring all the lease and everything else. But now in hindsight, you're a little older. You'd get paid on both of those probably.
Because there's real value in that. I believe
Ton of value. Yeah, we created $1 million in equity. It's huge.
I believe in paying value where value is created. And that's not even for me. I believe that in my counterparts or partners, if people are doing us something or did us something that created value for me, they should get their VIG. Even in brokerage, in brokering deals.
So what does the lease fee look like? What should you have gotten paid for restructuring that lease if it was in current terms?
You should get, let's call it a 5, at the time everything was 6%, so our fees get chopped over the years, but at the time it would have been a 6% fee on the rent of the base term that you earned. So we locked in $125,000 at 10 years. That's $1,250,000. 6% fee is $75K.
Wow. And then you get paid that over the term of the lease?
No.
Like, how do you get paid
that? 50% at lease signing and 50%.
Is the tenant putting enough down to cover that? Or is it cash come from?
The landlord pays that fee. Landlord always pays our fees.
Really?
Yeah, because you.
So he's essentially prepaying you for cash flow into the future.
He's paying you for the lease that you secured. Otherwise, he was going to accept a 50. That's
but like, what is the tenant putting down on that lease? Or nothing? They're just paying monthly.
No, they're signing a lease that they are with a corporate guarantee on it. So they are locking themselves in to a 10-year lease, and the only way that they're not going to pay that is if they go bankrupt.
So $125K a year, though, right? Is what you said the lease was. So it's only $10,400 a month, and the landlord's going to pay you $70K. What if he doesn't have the $70K sitting around? How does that work? They mortgage it, or they pull it from somewhere, and because in the sale, like, there's sales proceeds, right? Capital's coming in from somewhere in a lease structure like that. It's coming in monthly, but it's a big chunk of change.
If you really have to, you can structure it so that you get
the first few
months of rent and all that. Yeah, but generally, that doesn't become an issue because of upfront conversations, transparency. When I'm working with someone.
So usually you're selling it anyway. So you're probably going to restructure the lease, and then you're going to sell it, and then you're going to get paid on both of those upon sale, possibly.
Yeah, or just in general, hey, listen, if you want to hire me to go do this, this is what I think I can do. This is the fee, and this is where I think I will end up. Are you interested? If they were like, I don't even have the money, well, it's just a whole different conversation.
Sure.
Which, on a case-by-case basis, you make decisions, charitable decisions, stricter decisions, punt decisions, depending on what it is.
So once you guys teed that up, you restructured the lease, you then went and you did sell the building for him.
Correct.
And you remember what you sold it for, or no?
For about that number, but about 1.7. Yep.
And then you got 6% commission on it, or did you split that with another brokerage? Or
we split it. So now the net sale fee gets chopped a bunch. So let's use that same number, the $75K on a sale, because it would be the same kind of fee. Marcus and Millichap app or any brokerage shop takes their VIG, depending on and what that percentage is, changes depending on what your status level is.
Yeah, how your experience you are. Yeah.
As someone right in, they're getting 50%. You're also giving 50% to your senior.
Sure.
So you're getting a fourth of that fee.
Sure.
So I think I got, was it 17 grand? Something like that.
In residential, like, we usually split the commission and offer up as an incentive to the other agents that are bringing buyers. In that deal, did you bring the buyer to the table, or did you split the buyer with somebody else? So you guys found the buyer too.
Correct. We sold it to a REIT, a real estate investment trust, publicly traded.
That's
in our backyard here, Agree Realty.
Really? How'd you guys know that they would be interested in that product? Like, how'd you tee that up?
Because they buy, it's very clear what REITs will purchase. Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 companies, all the major ones that you could walk around and shop in, and they want firm term leases at 10 or 15. And you pretty well know what they're willing to pay for it. So REITs are super non-emotional buyers. They have a box, and they are going to pay this return based on where they borrow, and they want these types of tenants based on overall portfolio credit risk. And so you just kind of always know what they'll buy.
That's wild.
As a matter of fact, we went to them as a gut check first when there was like the 2 years left, and I was like, hey, you guys, there's no option on this thing. You can wheel and deal on it. Do you want to buy it? And they said, no, we want it with 10 years. So then we went, okay, I'll go get this with 10 years. Can we sell it to you? So we knew essentially all the while.
You had the buyer teed up before you even structured the deal. That's interesting. So you had invested essentially, 9 months in, you closed your first deal. Like, did you start closing other deals pretty quickly after that because you'd built a pipeline up, or was it still pretty sparse that second year in the business? First year's pretty empty until you get the pipeline built up.
Yeah, first year.
And you're getting your skills honed in, you're getting your knowledge base set up, like, in your niche.
It was, I stuck to the basics, the blueprint of what we were taught. And for someone in brokerage and someone that's been at Marcus and Millichap, hearing the word blueprint is redundant, but so true. Like it is, 250 calls a week, always be databasing, close for the meeting, not the proposal. Get in front of these people. Getting in front of them creates rapport. Then you close for the proposal. Once you get the proposal, then you go back and through conditional closes, you make sure that if I can get this pricing and I can do that you'll list with me, and then you get the listing. And if you just shut your mind off and do that for a year while learning and if you can fight through the pain of it because there's a lot of disappointment in that process, then the pipeline starts to fall. And so I sold that deal, and then I think I sold another one 2 months later, and then another one 2 months later. It kind of went.
So every couple of months you started closing deals.
Mm-hmm. And then there was a big one, and then it's all good.
In hindsight, man, for someone that's going to get in the industry that's just starting out, they're like, you know what, I'm going to go into commercial. Let's do this. Looking back, do you have any advice for that first 1 to 2 year window for them? Anything that you would have done differently, or anything you feel like you did really well that most people don't do well getting in the space?
It's something that I adhere to today, which is just consistency, all out consistency, which I waver way more today than I used to. Right? You got more going on in life, I think, now, but sticking to all those things that I just said and continuing on, learn to become numb to some of the deal pain along the way fast, because I went through quite a few, you go through, every new broker I think goes through quite a few pipeline traumas where you're counting the dollars, or you look at the bulk of your portfolio, or maybe a couple deals that you've closed already, and you go, man, okay, this is pretty good. And you take I absolutely, after my second year, took my foot off the pedal in terms of new lead generation and making those calls every day, because it was like, I got a pipeline. I'm 2 years in. I'm up with the big guys. Blah blah blah. And I didn't continue. I wasn't feeding 2 quarters ahead, which is really how I think today. And I fell flat on my face.
Wow.
In 2016, like worst year of my career. But it taught me the value of $1, and I was like, I'm ready to, move home with this life and get married and settle in. And I am never looking back, in that year is never happening again. And I've doubled my business almost every year since.
Wow, that's awesome. So that was the only misstep you made, is you let your foot off the gas after the first couple of years when you had the pipeline filled. And then it bit you in the ass in 2016 pretty hard. And then you had to double down again and then continue compounding and growing. And that just goes back to the basics. So just the certain number of calls every week, managing your database.
Yeah.
Constantly filling it.
Yeah. With net new. In all the podcasts we might listen to, or YouTube guys, or any of that stuff, one thing that never resonates with me is like the common line, wow, geez, everybody hates cold calling. Everybody doesn't like, if I could do nothing but rip new calls, I would be absolutely happy. That to me is, if I'm not doing it, any day that I'm not doing it, I'm anxious. if meeting or doing this and we got to do some proposals and it's stuff that has to be done, I feel my chest tighten as the day progresses until I'm like, I have to call some new people, because the cool part about
People don't come along very often.
look, our business is an unlimited pipeline, and all you have is your time. And there's managing escrows, and there's control elements and experience that comes along with being in the business and being successful. But at our core, we've got a big long hose, and the hose has a bunch of holes in it for water to leak out. And so as long as I am constantly feeding that at the top, I don't care what water is leaking out, because at some point stuff comes out the end. And that to me is cold calling new people.
Well, part of it's mindset too, right? If you get in the art of having conversations with people and you genuinely enjoy, you enjoy talking and shooting the shit and talking about business, it's probably easier to cold call like your type of audience, because it's older guys that own buildings that have been in the business. You have something you can connect with them on, like you both have an appreciation for real estate. You're bringing something of value to the table. So it's not like it's a brutal like cold call from someone that might not necessarily want to hear from you. Like you've got the ability to add value to them, and it makes it more of an art, more of a fun type of call experience than like some types of cold calling, which are more irritable per se.
Yeah, there'll be people that are yelling at the podcast, yelling at the speaker during this part of the conversation, but we are absolutely selling something, generally, if you're doing it right, selling a means to make money. It's the finance side, not the accounting side, right? So we're not like trading a dollar here for a dollar there. If you actually have some value for people, then there's a reason they need to hear that. However, brokers are a dime a dozen. So, oftentimes you're the seventh call to that new person. And if you don't have a good way to articulate the value that you can bring pretty quickly, then it's no different than selling. I don't want to drop something and make other people mad. Selling something that doesn't have as good of a need,
Makes sense.
Almost said insurance.
Did you, I can think of a few other categories too. But, so when you first started cold calling, how did you get yourself from like feeling uncomfortable and hating it and the pain of it to then like loving it the way that you do now and having appreciation for the art? Because lead generation is everything in all forms of sales, and you got to have the capability to do it.
Okay, so the easy, simple answer is cold calling means more money. I'm a capitalist, but no. But from a more rooted fundamental shift, I think that when I discovered the day that I was able to shift my mindset and confidence that what I have to tell these people or to talk to them about matters. Or let me say it a different way. Even though I was young in the business and didn't have as much track record in real estate than that guy that has 40 shopping centers and is sitting on a yacht and he's 70, I am way more in tune with what is happening in the market today than 100 of those guys. And it's because of those calls and those conversations. If you're making the 250 calls, then I'm having conversations with 100 of those yacht sitting multimillionaires, and they're sharing bits and pieces of information with me, and I'm the collective resource of that. And I know a lot about real estate, and you have a heartbeat, and you own real estate, and therefore you need to give me the time. And it was like that. It was understanding that I'm not calling them to like ask for a favor.
Sure.
And that if they would just give me the time, that I can create something for them that became a fun game.
Calling to provide value. Do you remember the first client that was a repeat client that you did a deal with and they came back to you and you're like, oh, this guy came back to me, repeat business, you provided enough value to them to where they saw that you were helping boost profitability, and they came back and they did a second deal with you. Do you remember in your mind who that was or no? And then how you felt after that repeat transaction or a business where what it felt like being a young new broker?
Yeah. Guy owns a handful of auto parts deals in Southside Chicago, and we got one done for him, convinced him, and it took a long time. And
one done meaning you helped him sell or buy?
we sold one of his, and it was like, I don't want to get rid of all my stuff, but you can get that return, or you can get me that great price. Okay, we'll do this one. And I did what I said I was going to do in a faster amount of time, with ease. We controlled the process really well, especially, nowadays I'm proud of young Evan and how that transaction went, because we got ahead of a lot of things, and we liked each other. And so we went to dinner, we were sitting with his son, and he said, you did right by me on this one. Hell, if you can get me that price on these other 3, then let's go. And 3 days later, we had the 3 listed, and we eventually sold those as a portfolio.
That's
so
awesome.
$1 million deal those all happened to be a little more expensive too, turned into 3 for a total of, that portfolio was about $6 million.
That's awesome.
So, the repeat business is, look, that is what we're shooting for always, right? So I'll take on a singular deal. Someone owns, a shopping center or a property in a market, and this is their one and done. That's fine. We work those deals. Alternatively, if you have 5 clients that have a good portfolio of deals and you are the person that they go to, you're in a really good place. My goal always is to build the relationship and rapport with a client that they have with their financial advisor or their attorney. And I'd say their attorney more than anything. Guys don't make a single decision without calling their attorneys anymore to double check it. I want that same thing when they're dealing with their real estate. Don't do a damn thing until you call me and want to know my opinion on whether you should or shouldn't. And I will tell guys that straight up.
Sure.
And so that's the level of client service, me to them, that I am trying to provide, but also trying to earn and get to that point.
Makes sense. Let's chat some more deal stories, man. Because we've talked about a few of the intro deals that you did early in your career, what that experience kind of feels like getting started, what people should expect getting into the industry. Let's talk about some other fun deals that you've done for clients and why some of these clients like buy and sell. Like, like for instance, the last one you were just talking about, the guy that gave you one auto parts place to sell and then gave you 3 more. Like, why was he cash? He had a young son, obviously. Why is he cashing out of those? Like, why do these guys sell? Is it usually always the big funds that are buying, or is it sometimes your other clients that are trying to shelter cash? Like, talk to us the motivations of both sides for the sellers and the buyers, and then let's go through some more fun deal stories.
Okay. Look, the main reasons to sell are either on the offense, pricing is freaking great, so greed, or sometimes on the defense, and that's honestly one of the primary. The market has changed. The health of the company has changed. You're getting out of this building before something bad happens. Look at Rite Aid with their recent bankruptcy.
Did people know that was coming that own those and try offloading them before Rite Aid announced bankruptcy?
Some did, some didn't. And I don't think people know with certainty, but we felt, like, I know personally, I felt like it was coming for years. And so, and for example, I knew 2 days ahead of, based on a relationship that I have, ahead of most in Michigan and Ohio, that every one of those in those 2 states were closing. So I cleared my schedule and I called every one of those owners and said, this is what's going to happen. And
what did they say? Were they receptive? And then what was the game plan with a lot? I'm curious what happened with a lot of those. Like, because once they file for bankruptcy, they can stop paying rent immediately. The owners then they still have to cover all the overhead taxes, mortgage, otherwise, they got to have capital reserves to do that. How quickly does that tenant get out? And then how long do those structures stay vacant? Are you guys repurposing them? Who are you putting back in those spaces? Because this is a current topic as it's in real time.
Yeah, so this isn't as fun of a deal story, but it's more on the defensive, right? So when things go wrong, unfortunately, many people purchased these Rite Aids even in recent years and paid a substantial number for them. I'm grateful that I didn't sell too many of those. I worked other things, but I'm helping to get people out. And so making the conscious decision to call every one of those owners and use that information was a huge hedge on time, because they were going to say, okay, what do we do? And I was I took it upon myself to go represent a handful, as many as I can get, for the most part, for sale or for lease. And so, were they receptive? Many were like, I know I'm not on some list. I saw the latest publication and my store's still open, or I haven't heard anything, or my attorney hasn't called me. But the hammer dropped within the subsequent 2 weeks or so. And so with access to that information and with that call, folks came back to me and said, okay, you're right. What do we do here? So, our firm has a little over 50 of these vacant former Rite Aids, primarily Michigan and Ohio, a couple in Pennsylvania. And some are just difficult deals to do, but we've been able to do backfill these. So put a tenant in.
What type of tenant? Who's going to rent the space?
National hardware, like an Ace or a Harbor Freight. Urgent care.
Yeah.
I'm doing a VA, veterinary affairs facility. This one was fun. I did I'll give them a little plug here. At Sashabaw and Dixie Highway, we sold a Rite Aid, and they're currently redeveloping that. It's going to be a whiskey bar and high-end golf sim facility.
Nice.
Called Hazel Rockets.
All right, that sounds fun.
It's a cool spot. They just got their signs up. They'll open in, I think, in February. So that's a cool reuse of a Rite Aid in an area that the city wants to see new walkable things. They have some other developments going on in that immediate corridor, so they were excited to see a consumer, restaurant or entertainment use. People are subdividing these. So we are carving out spots for, say, 3,000 square feet for the likes of a Chipotle or a Panera or an end cap drive-through like Tropical Smoothie, and then creating 2 other spaces to backfill. Now, that's one of the more expensive routes.
So there's still opportunity for these spaces. 'Cause I feel like your niche in retail, it's changing so rapidly, like with everyone ordering products online. But it seems like with a lot of these locations with the Rite Aids, it's still desirable real estate. There's still a market around it. And it seems like there's a lot more options than I actually thought there would be to reconfigure the use case for those spaces.
The bottom line is construction costs are too high. And so to build new, a developer, if they're going to take on that project, needs a rent that far exceeds what these tenants can do. And so automatically they are going to have to look at second generation space. And so we're in the midst of one of the greatest leasing booms that we've experienced in 30 years, because you had COVID knock various businesses out. You've had subsequent bankruptcies of retail. And that's the highlight that I think a lot of people take away. Oh my gosh, retail is struggling. But the reality is, with as many of those businesses that leave, it creates new life and new space for the tenants that are doing well and that are expanding to backfill. And that's what's happened.
So how long do you think it's going to take for the all 50 of those retail locations to get reconfigured, released? And then are a lot of those owners going to sell those buildings once they're leased, or you think they're going to keep them? Like, what's that transition been looking like?
It'll be buy, sell, hold will be that's case by case, right? So by backfilling the tenant, by putting a tenant in the space, you are creating a ton of equity for these clients. And so they can either refinance, pull their cash out, and enjoy the rent. Others are going, okay, great, thanks for this tenant. Now I'm not going to lose my ass. Let's exit. So I'll give you a quick case study. I sold one to an investor who had a reason to purchase it to protect an existing business of his that was down the street. We have a 10-year lease negotiated with a national tenant. He paid, I'll give you just simple math, he paid $2 million for that property. We're going to put a 10-year lease in that space. That deal, after the lease is done and the tenant's open, is probably worth 3.8. So he can sit on the equity and enjoy the cash flow and know that his business down the street is protected, or he can sell that and there's still a lease, so his business is moderately still protected and he can cash out.
It's wild to me how different like residential and commercial is. Like you guys are able to literally place a tenant and then double the value of the property. It's wild.
So people value properties based on the bricks and the sticks of the building, which is more of your world. What's happening here locally? What is the building worth vacant? That's essentially what that's what you're selling. You're selling vacant homes generally. The other way to value these deals is the cash flow and the income, the credit worthiness of that tenant. And oftentimes we're selling what we call investment grade quality tenants. So again, Fortune 500 retailers or medical tenants that are absolutely going to pay you that rent as long as the company exists. And so people are willing to pay a lot more for the reliable income.
It's wild. So is it with the buyer on that? It's gonna he buys a building for $2 million. You guys place a strategic tenant, 10-year lease structure, get it all signed, buttoned up. Now it's worth $4 million. Who's the buyer at $4 million? Is it a Wall Street fund? Or are there?
Yeah, it's you go back to.
So you guys are selling a lot of these to REITs because it's like you have all this capital in the U.S. that needs to be sheltered. People don't know how to manage the money. It gets taken from pension funds, wherever. It goes to Wall Street. They come in, and then the mom and pop guys that have ran these buildings for years or bought them and developed them, like that, they're selling out, and Wall Street's buying up most of the commercial real estate.
Yeah, so REITs buy a lot of it. And I'm sorry to my friend REIT, my friendly REIT partners, but my preference is almost always to sell to a private individual because
if the buyer exists,
because there is more control. There's more. There's a higher likelihood of a sale on the back end. I can advise and affect change and help and assist in the long-term structure of that deal, and so there's more to do in it. Whereas REITs have they have much less reason to sell. They have the money and they're buying those to generally hold. So it's an inventory thing.
Interesting.
But yes, REITs are, they're the cash is king. They're super credible. If you get a REIT offer, you can rely on it.
How long did that process take where the client you talked about, he's bought that property for $2 million, mainly to protect his other business that he had that was in the same strip mall or area or whatever. Renovation, new tenant place. What was that process like to be able to sell it for $4 million and exit it? Like,
so that's not done yet, but it was list in December, under contract in April, close in August of this year.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I was negotiating with the tenant all the while. We'll get to lease execution and then 3 months for build out, and then the rent's going. So now you're talking about a potential 2025 sale. Now, that client is likely to keep the deal because they like the tenant, they like the location, and they don't need the equity, the cash.
Interesting. You mentioned earlier sometimes they'll refi, pull capital back out, mortgage the property. I know in commercial it's also again very different from residential. We get 30-year mortgages. Even like our ARMs are 10-year, like 7 to 10-year plays where you have a pretty long time frame. I hear consistently that in the commercial space, you guys have very short term, like mortgages with fixed rates. And then a lot of times people lose property or there's defaults because when those mortgages come due, interest rates have jumped up. It's the property no longer cash flows. Then they're just walking away. Like, how often does that actually happen? For someone that wants to get into and invest in that space, how do like the savvy owners like navigate that to where they're not losing their asses every 7 years when interest rates jump up? Or
Sure. Well, in the scenario that people got a loan at a low interest rate and 5 years later it was substantially higher, I think, how many times did that happen in the last 30 years? This is kind of a now situation. Otherwise, they've been, interest rates have generally improved over the years. So I think we're always going to be, you can be vulnerable to that. But yes, these are fixed rate loans at about 5%, 5 or 10 year loans. They are amortized on 25 or 30 year usually. Smart individuals who don't want or need the cash flow will amortize at 15 or 20 year. Sometimes guys will
they'll pay down their equity.
They'll amortize the loan alongside the term of the lease. So a 15-year lease, they'll get a 15-year amortization, and so by the time that lease is done, they'll at least owe it free and clear.
Interesting.
Now, they didn't pull a lot of cash during that time. But that's a smart coupon.
So they actually minimize their cash flow in order to own the building outright and then reduce risk of losing it.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. But you mentioned that. So on the residential side, you can add value to a property in terms of making certain improvements. Hey, we're going to go to market. And let's do these 5 things. You've sold 3 more homes for me.
Yeah.
And we can make certain adjustments. But if you're backfilling with a renter and you have a renter in a home that's been there for 20 years, someone will pay more money for that rental. Maybe they'll eventually use the home or tear it down or develop it. But how often do you run into scenarios where you're selling like a single family rental and there's value in that, or not really?
Not very often. They're usually getting bulldozed and redeveloped. Yeah.
In this market.
At least in the Woodward corridor, yeah, where the demand is for newer construction, because the needs for the families have changed, like floor plan fundamentals. I have not seen many residential rentals like sold to landlords that then buy them, and it's like it's all I think it's because we have a housing shortage too, right? So we have a lot of like our generation and slightly younger than us that's now are all buying homes, and they now all want to live in walkable communities. So you have all this demand driven into one small area, and there's not enough supply. So the landlords that have owned houses for 20 or 30 years are turning them over, and it's either retail owners buying them or it's developers that are buying them and tearing them down and building, and then they're selling new construction to families that want to live in them. So it's a complete different monster.
How often have you run into the private equity purchase?
In Michigan, we haven't.
Okay.
They're not buying here.
It's just not here.
No, they're buying in other strategic states that are growth oriented.
Carolinas, Florida,
Yep.
Georgia, and then some of the
I haven't seen any here actually.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I have a question if you'd allow it.
Of course, the producer always has questions.
Well, sorry. I was curious about you as a commercial broker. I think you have a unique opportunity to, in some ways, shape a community or shape a certain block. Like, what does that process look like for your investors, for yourself when you're going in? It's like, all right, this is not going to be Kmart anymore. We're going to try to get Gucci, Prada, and Van Muir in here or something like that. How does that process start? What's sort of some of the thinking behind that? And like, how can you go in and like actually like transform? Because I would imagine bringing in a different kind of quality tenant would augment foot traffic, it'd augment the profile of the neighborhood, all those types of things.
We have a lot of these strip centers around here that are all getting redeveloped too. Like, how do you guys analyze the data, and then who do you put in those? How do you put that together?
I only ask it specifically because like I've seen like Detroit like transform over the last like just in a very short amount of time, where it's like now there's a Gucci down there's Nike, and it will continue, I think, in that trend as long as they keep doing what they're doing. So I was just curious to get your perspective on that.
I know it's wild to think that 12 years ago we didn't have streetlights in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you went to a game and then you eerily went to your car and got out of there and went back to the suburbs. It's such a different.
And you were thankful your windows weren't blown out too, and you get back.
It's such a different consumer experience now. Now it's incredible, and there's more to do than one even has time for. Detroit specifically is super unique in that regard because there was this huge chicken before the egg issue. You can't bring the people, you can't bring the good retailers unless there are people. And the people won't come or want to live there if they don't have cool things to do, buy, or experience. And so it really did take a collective of a couple billionaire families to say, we are committed here. And Bedrock and those guys and a couple others really were the catalyst to prop that up. There's a lot of infill in between where individuals who live, work, eat, and breathe in Detroit identified small properties where they did exactly that. They weren't in this for the money. They wanted to shape a community. There's one group I was with recently who, through a very complicated deal, purchased a old decrepit box and a lot, worked with the city plus public-private partnerships to fill a void, and created a community-based co-op. It's fresh food, fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, other services in this big beautiful thing. I mean, that right there is transformative in a city community. I wish I had a couple grand stories to say, hey, here are the 3 things I did, and now this community is absolutely thriving. I got to give credit to the folks that put up a lot of the money, all the money, which is the developers and those guys with the heavy lift who have that eye. I'm the soldier that helps them investigate, vet, dig up those deals, assemble, negotiate the prices, and make sure that the deal can happen. But it's our phenomenal developers locally that see a shopping center and go, you know what, or see like 4 old buildings and say, these need to be demolished, pushed back. Beautiful parking lot, mixed use ground floor retail, and 4 levels of luxury apartments or affordable housing and things like that. But I can relate in that we can guide who we sell things to, and I have a very good client and mentor. Who called me in December. I sold one deal for him back in 2016. He affected me so positively, and he was such a fascinating person. His name was Al Hood, that we grabbed lunch every quarter from then on. It was just one of those people that you never left the conversation without having learned something. He called me in December. I'm sick. I've got this portfolio of properties, and I don't, we have a whole bunch of partners with family, and I don't want to leave them all with it. So he hired me to handle the sale of the assets. He was a phenomenal landlord to his tenants. I mean, his family made money, but he did not own those from a capitalistic sense. He wanted to promote business. He helped people much too much, which was wonderful. So, everybody was blessed to have that type of landlord shapes a community. And it was something, I remember he told me in COVID, it was all we did for that year was make calls and go, how are things and what can we do? And he said, I'm fine. It was my tenants are, I've called every one of them already. This was like day 2 of shutdown. I've called every one of them and told them, take your break, run your business how you can. We'll worry about rent later. And I don't think he had one leave, because they all wanted to pay these debts back, and they all wanted to stay open for business. So I think it's how you handle your investments as an owner or investor and how you treat people that also helps shape the community.
That's amazing. Let's go through and talk about like maybe 3 of your top favorite deal stories with numbers. So guys can get an idea of different types of deals you've done, what goes into those, and then we'll shift to like more generic questions to wrap this up in the end.
Okay. But this is just the top favorite deal story and less about the numbers because it's wild. I had a Starbucks in Kokomo, Indiana, and we were under contract. This is back in the Chicago days. Me and my one of our juniors, we both needed this deal, frankly. We were under contract. The seller needed the deal. She had to get out. It was to pay medical bills for her husband, who was now in a home. So really, you had some buy-in and wanting this to happen for her. Friday at 5, the due diligence period expires, which means you're now non-refundable. The deal is pretty much locked up. You can.
What was the MD amount? Do you remember?
$50,000.
Oh, that's pretty hefty MBA.
That's about
What was the purchase price?
$2 million.
Okay.
2 million.
What was Starbucks paying her at?
Let's see. Well, forget the financials on this one because
Okay.
it's big. It's a big picture thing. So, Friday at 5, she calls me, or Friday at 2, the seller calls me and is like, "Oh my God, the building's gone. The building's gone." I said, "What do you mean the building's gone?" And she's like, "Look at the news. The building's gone." I'm like, "What the hell?" And lo and behold, I look up Kokomo, Indiana, and there's 7 tornadoes that had touched down in Kokomo, Indiana. One of them comes down in between this Simon property-owned massive mall, which our Starbucks sat out in front of, wipes Starbucks off the face of the planet, and then the tornado disappears and didn't do any other damage to any other building that exists. And you can watch this you can look it up on either NBC Nightly News, World Star Hip Hop.
What? That's
because
wild,
some
man.
guy was filming it. The bartender of the like Chili's across the street filmed the Starbucks just gone.
Wow.
So tragic and sucked. However, persistence and sticking to this deal and figuring out, okay, what can we do here to still make everybody money this is like a deal I learned so much from. Huge crushing blow. Oh my gosh. I think most brokers would just kind of like move on and be like, what am I supposed to do here? Now the value of the land, I guess, is a couple $100,000. We called Starbucks immediately and said, well, your building is blown down. What do you want to do here? And they said, if you'll build us a new building, we will sign a new 10-year lease. We want a double drive-through, and we'll pay you a bigger rent. I'm simplifying. There was some negotiation in that over time, but essentially they were like, we want to be here. This old lady is not a developer, so that's not going to happen. So
what was the insurance like?
boom. So we got her a sale price of a couple $100,000, $350,000. She got $1.6 million in insurance, which is non-tax. So she got $1.6 million plus the $350,000. Our fee was then only based on $350,000, which was fine. She ended up netting out better now that the building had blown away than she was going to get after all was said and done. Like, I think we were under contract less than $2 million, and she ended up at just about at $1.9 million. We sold this land strategically to a great developer that we knew could handle the project, and a year and a half later, so he bought it for $3 million, $300,000. He does this development, and I sold that. So he's in it for I think about $1.5 million, and I sold that 2 years later to a NASCAR driver for about 2.3 or 2.4. So full life cycle, was gonna just sell a Starbucks deal. Our seller ended up great. with a little stress, but seller ended up great. Developer gets a great fee deal to do. I, over the course of 3 years, get to sell it twice, kind of.
That's awesome.
But it was that day that, the day that it fell over, it was like, I am going to sell this deal again, and sticking with it, checking in with those people every quarter and figure out what needed to happen to earn the business and be ready when they were ready to sell the Starbucks.
That's great, man.
And then I had a fire.
That's similar situation.
Oh yeah, no, it was Chicago, man. Yeah, Chicago, downtown portion like this, super hot property, listed on a Thursday.
Should we label these deals or no? Like, get property addresses to them or not? Or I mean, whatever you want to label them, I guess.
Like after the fact or right now?
Like now.
Oh, one was the Starbucks in Kokomo, Indiana.
We'll get formal labels or sex later.
The tornado incident and I'll send you the I'll send you the Starbucks falling down. It's still on YouTube.
That's awesome.
That's a bar trick. Hey, look at this. We were selling this bankruptcy portfolio, so it was a whole bunch of deals, like $40 million. I mean, it was a huge deal for me that early on. It's about three years in, we earned some bankruptcy portfolio assets. And this was Clark Street retail, mixed use in the heart of Chicago in Wrigley Field. I mean, just sexy real estate, likely to be maybe to be redeveloped, but likely to at least to be improved. Listed it on a Thursday. Friday at 5, we had, I think, 9 offers. We have an accepted offer at a little over list. I think like $5.7 million for the combined 2 deals. So I make a call to Jessica, and I'm like, if we're not doing Groupon tonight, we're and
who was the buyer on those? Do you remember?
A local developer.
Oh, it was nice.
Yep, in state, in town, knew what it was, and I'm taking Lakeshore Drive, which is the main highway up back to Wrigley, which is essentially where we lived, and all of Wrigley is covered in smoke. I'm like, oh my gosh. Now I'm one of those people that slow down when you see that, what's the word for that? When you see cops and all that stuff. I'm a gawker. So I'm like, I'm going to go check this out. I go and grab my bike and I start riding over to Clark Street. I'm like, man, this is getting kind of close to our building. I call my partner, George. I'm like, George, this is pretty close. I'm 2 blocks away. And he's like, oh no, I hope there's not going to be smoke damage. That might affect our deal. And I'm like, George, I'm getting way closer. He goes, oh man, I hope there's not like some heat damage. And then of course I pull up and I'm like, George, there is no building. These things were engulfed in flames.
Wow.
There was a hookah bar on the ground floor and someone kicked something over and, boom, poof, both of them, had complete scrape.
Wow.
Now, inevitable buyer stuck with that deal.
He was planning on developing it anyway, though?
He was going to redevelop it.
So it didn't matter to him.
Yeah.
He's buying.
Now it's a big, beautiful, multi-story, mixed-use development.
Wow. And he didn't retrade it, stuck with it.
Oh, no. Yeah,
Oh, you do?
Yeah, he bought it for, I think he bought, we were a lot closer to $1.3 million. I mean, that's dirt.
So the developer went in and kicked over some coals. I'm just kidding.
Well, wasn't a developer, but there's. Yeah, it was an interesting one.
That's wild. And then the seller got insurance funds as well, I assume. So he was made whole again.
Well, bankruptcy.
Or more.
It was already in bankruptcy, so the lender had a quick write down, and they got what they got.
Wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other fun deal stories that people could relate to as far as the buyers or the sellers try to achieve maybe investment targets or
look,
wants to say I'm trying to do this for my family or build this much cash flow or
yeah,
do a deal with a certain exit strategy and
On a smaller scale, what I do at my core is help investors who have some funds, a doctor or an entrepreneur that wants to put something together. Maybe they have commitments on a restaurant concept that they're going to open 5 of. People come to me with that criteria. We go hunt down particular deals. You want to see something with a little bit of vacancy, and we're going to help them purchase the shopping center, for example. We can look at them putting in just their business and what that does to the cash flow. On the flip side, you do a full exterior renovation. You get the existing tenants to buy into the renovations. I don't mean financially, just that yes, if you make this center nicer, I would love to stay here longer, so we can get new long-term commitments. Maybe you can kick up rent a little bit. It's what you're seeing. You mentioned it on Woodward. People are breathing new life into shopping centers all the time because it's too expensive to build ground up at this point. Nobody can afford that rent. So I mean, I guess there are specifics, but it's there's a lot of them, right? They're typical deals. What are you experiencing in terms of residential development versus the existing deals? I know in the last few years we've had this all out, boom in growth here. Are developers still taking them down, putting them up, and are they moving? Are we starting to see that slide? Are homes sitting a little longer here?
As of right now, we're still seeing a move, but that's because we're in the small target community where people have to move in and out, right? When you've got executives that relocate, high profile physicians, athletes, like they have to move. They want certain quality and standards for their families. So like this infill product, like we can't find enough teardowns, and then anything we put up is going to sell, even if they don't build and design it well. It's going to trade. We had more seasonality this year than we've had in the past, mainly because it was an election year probably, and maybe some of the wealthier individuals that tend to move around are waiting to see what was going to happen with the election. So first part of the year was like really, really hot, and then it was dead when summer hit, because people usually vacation with their kids for summer in this community. So like summer tends to be a little slow anyway for 2 months. June, July, August, mainly July and August. June, people are usually still hunting, and then July, August are dead. They're on vacation. And then with election cycle, September, October, November were slower.
Yeah.
November picked up a little bit. And then we got the holidays now. So definitely that Michigan seasonality, but we still have very, very low inventory. So I think that next year it's going to pick up. I do think that it's going to be interesting to see a year and a half from now how stuff plays out, because pricing is getting so high, because a lot of the land value jumped up, especially in Birmingham specifically. So like we had lots that were historically traded for 5-6 years in a row for $325 to $400K, right? Same size 50-foot lot, depending on the category in the neighborhood. And builders were desperate for inventory early this year, and those lots jumped $200,000. Like guys were bidding them up. And we had also newer builders coming to town that build a cheaper product in lower price point markets, but maybe aren't as familiar. And so the last 4 or 5 of those are all 500, 507, 515, 525. So they jumped up $200K. So that now puts that housing product, all of it, over $2 million, 2.1 to 2.1 to 2.3, 2.4, and these are like narrow lots, detached garage products. So I'm a little nervous as to how many buyers are willing to spend between 2.1 and 2.3 on a house with a detached garage. I mean, it's west of Woodward, but still.
Yeah.
So I think that we might have some adjustment in the next couple of years on that land pricing, where builders get burnt and they can't get the number that they thought. That land cost might actually come back down on some of those 50-foot lots. I don't think it's ever going back into the high threes, but could it drop by $100K from 520 to 420 or 435 or 440? Yeah, it's possible.
And what about these? I don't know if you know, because there's not a ton on the like large scale neighborhood development. But what about these 150 home developments that are, half built? Are they overselling? Or do you think inventory is sitting? Or what do you see these guys do? 20 homes. They roll out 20.
Depends on where they're at and the price point. Like you got two different categories that we're seeing for the developments that are further out. The ones that are like somewhat close, that are still within like 30 to 45 minutes of a hospital, where like some of the younger physicians within proximity of Ann Arbor, for instance, right? So you go north of there to Howell or to wherever, you got these more rural areas of farmland, and they're doing like the more entry level housing developments where you can actually buy a house for under 450 grand that's new, under $500,000, which in this side of town is not possible. So they're able to get a new house with a reasonable floor plan, bare bones, like basic entry level quality, but it's clean, it's nice, cute communities. That's really what's like being developed, and those are all selling because they're within 30 minutes of a primary like hub. And then you have further up north where you have the people that are at the end of their career that are, if they can't afford to live in town in a walkable community here, they're going further out to the golf course type communities.
The Del Webb over Milford Road is a 55 and up community, I think.
Yep, they're going north wherever, and they want to live on a golf course and kind of downsize and have newer construction for a lot less cost. That's kind of what we've been seeing. So it's interesting. So back to you, brother. Let's run through some rapid fire, like commercial versus residential stuff to go through and kind of summarize this. So how do you like personally define a good deal in commercial?
I think money is made in the buy. So if you are purchasing an asset at a price per square foot that is either at or below, ideally below replacement costs, you're in a pretty good place. If you are purchasing an asset where the raw land or the vacant property is priced similar to that, then it's a really good buy. If you're purchasing something that has a thing that you can do, a value add lever by doing some of the things we talked about, renegotiating a lease or backfilling with a new tenant or two, or developing the out parcel, then those are the good deals.
How's the pandemic reshaped the way that people think about commercial spaces, especially office and retail?
Office is a wild one, and it's tough to touch on, but that's not rapid fire. In retail, retail through the pandemic flushed out businesses that already had probably bigger issues, and so you did see a lot of retail bankruptcies. But with those. It was an out of field, and with the new situation, I think the singular thing from a positive standpoint that we experienced through the pandemic as it pertains to retail was a boom or growth in technology. So businesses adopted technology plans or things that they were going to do over the next 10 years. They did it in 8 months. And that made companies very lean, like quick service restaurants. All of a sudden you're adopting third-party delivery. You got the cubbies you can walk up, contactless. They're doing double and triple drive-throughs. I mean, all that stuff was met with resistance prior to the pandemic. And then once it happened, it was like, okay, we got to do this.
Force fed fast.
Yeah, and quick service restaurants are booming, other than labor costs.
Did you notice on Southfield Road, all of those old office buildings? I think they might have several of the same owners, but all of them traded in the last couple of years. They're all getting converted to like residential rental units.
Yeah, yes, but I'm a person that likes to stay away from the term, or I think the low-hanging fruit answer is, let's just convert it to multifamily. It's extremely expensive to do that, and there are only certain floor plans that you can do that with. And like at our core, you go back to technology. The 1980s office build doesn't have good fiber, internet, any of that, bones, right? And so it's substantially expensive to convert those. So yes, it's happening, both because there's a substantial need, or they're getting some subsidy. But there's a lot of answers.
What do you think is going to happen to most of the office space that's not being used anymore? It's getting converted. Like, what's that going to be used for in the future? 5 years out?
Class A office is doing fine, other than, those investors or investment groups or hedge funds.
Let's say all the small office buildings, like those ones along like Southfield, all these high traffic roads that had small little mini offices. And
People are making small to medium office floor plans, essentially updating the interiors of those buildings and maybe updating some amenities. And we're actually seeing in a post-COVID world a number of office tenants that backfill that. And I'm talking an attorney, some brokers, an artist, a therapist, medical users. Those folks are backfilling 600 square feet, 800 square feet, 1,200 square feet. So conversion for some, existing office for others, and tear down.
When you think about your journey in real estate, how do you come to understand the art of negotiation in the commercial space? Or how did you come to understand that? Was that just initially early on that you figured it out with some counsel from your mentor? Was it naturally intuitive? Like, how did that?
I think negotiating is, if it's an art, that's something someone has to work on their whole life. And so, there's still a ton I could learn in that space. There's probably a ton that I do wrong, but I do fancy myself a fine negotiator through experience. To me, negotiating is two key components: control and leverage. What leverage do you have in that situation, and how can you control as much of the data or emotions at hand to get to a net result that gets the deal done. And finally, in negotiating, sometimes we have to get very granular and talk about every little repair and maintenance item or every little thing that came up and assign a value to it. There's other deals where nobody cares anything about the data. We just got to apply a number. So what's the number to make everybody move forward? And so I think it's a learning experience.
It's a fun part of the business. How do you personally decide if a property is worth pursuing?
From the perspective of me as broker to list a deal?
Or if from a perspective of, do you think it's worth buying or pitching or selling to clients? Either one.
If I'm going to take on a deal, we're going to have very transparent conversations about where I think the property is going to trade. And you know this full well, right? So someone may want a much higher price point. Actually, case and point, you sold a home for me this year, and I really wanted to go out at a dumb, aggressive number. And you, even though we're friends, didn't sugarcoat it. You said, okay, yeah, we could probably do that if you want, but here's the comps, and I think that there's probably no way that someone pays you this number for. And we both agreed to take on the assignment because I think you expressed that stuff clearly to me. I relayed back to you, yep, I believe you and I get it, but let's test them.
Let's try it.
Place. And you knew that there was an eventual sale there. So, and we adapted quickly, right? You provided me with the market feedback, and inside of 20 days, we adjusted price.
Sure.
Maybe less than that.
Yeah.
It was just like, this is showings are light. Okay, let's move. We dropped it at 25 grand. I run my business the exact same way. I will not, I come in very conservative, like an investor or a lender would think, using substantial reserves, and we're not trying to buy listings. So we're going to have a conversation about real expectations. And then, sure, if we need to stretch and a seller wants us to and they understand, then great. So the short answer is you take on a deal if my and seller expectations are aligned, and if I can get excited about selling the asset.
What do you think the biggest mistakes are that you've seen investors make chasing deals in your space?
Something I am guilty of myself on the investing side, which is getting emotionally attached to a deal, or through that, underwriting to solve for the price that will win you the deal versus underwriting to solve for the return or risks that you were inherently looking for in the first place.
Makes sense. Outside the numbers, how do you evaluate property's value in commercial or in your retail space?
Intrinsic value in the dirt and the ground. I would presume I'd like your answer too on the residential side, but I look at a deal stripped down. So if and when this tenant leaves, if I have to put a new roof on it, or if I need to reuse the building in some manner, what's the value of that? So you have that, and then how do I value the existing cash flow or the lease? And then there's that intrinsic. Man, the figures don't line up. The seller's price doesn't line up as much, but I know this is a something, or I know at some point I can do something with it. There are guys that operate whole businesses just on that.
And they're more creative on the X than what they can do.
Yes.
There might not be data to support it, but they have a gut instinct based on market knowledge, what they can do with it.
Which is, I don't run that way. I'm too conservative. I'm the finance guy.
Yeah, so in residential, man, it's like it's mainly based on sale value. So you're looking at market data, and then you're looking at the data that's not there. What are you actively competing against? How has the buyer demand been? It's much more like fluid and gut instinct. And there are gaps where you can create and put up product that there's no like evidence for necessarily. But if you know there's a market gap and you talk to enough buyers, but yeah, it's not as simple and straightforward as commercial, which is all data and numbers. Like, because you could look at a property's build costs here, but if there's no buyers for it, then it's not what's really worth. It's only worth what a buyer in the marketplace will actually pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just like keeping tabs. And then again, what that property can trade for might be different in different times and seasons of the year.
Right.
So it's different. What do you think the most challenging aspect of the due diligence process is for you guys? You have much longer due diligence periods than a residential. There's a lot more steps, a lot more parties that have to be involved in due diligence. Like, how do you ensure nothing gets missed on that front?
Yeah. So as a service to clients, to me, I'm a control freak. So type A, like I want to have my hand in all of it. So even though an attorney or a title company might be willing to do X or Y, I want to be the person that is the trigger point or the point of contact. I want to be on site. So to me, the due diligence process is an avoidance of unknowns process. So as long as I can cover as much of the things that may pop up ahead of time, then these deals run very smooth. The other thing is I've got great relationships with contractors, roofers, third-party guys, environmental, survey, people that I can really rely on, not only to refer to my client, but also to just tap for questions as a resource. So if there's a roof issue or if something comes up, very quickly, we're getting the realistic quotes from those individuals that a client, a seller, or a buyer can lean on, and we can negotiate from there.
So you've been at the top of the game, man, as far as commercial brokerage. What do you think sets like the best brokers apart in the commercial space in your industry from the rest of the industry? I assume it's similar to residential, where it's like there's a few small percentage, 1 to 5% that do the bulk of the business. Is that true in commercial, or is it a little more spread out? Those
I think
lower producers just get pushed out of the industry.
I think that the data would show a similar fact that folks, the bulk of the deals are being done by a small group of people. However, I will proudly plug Encore for a minute here. We've had multiple years where 80-20 rule is just blown out, and there's a whole bunch of agents, there's a middle majority that are doing reasonably well, and that group makes up a better majority than even some of the couple of top producers. So what's cool there is, yeah, it's a for whatever reason, kudos to the partners. There's a bunch of guys that can take down some deals, make some money, make a living. But what it takes. We talked about that.
What does it take to set the top brokers apart from the rest?
It's the old do now. Oh, I'm gonna butcher it, so that's not cool. For those willing to put in work, and apply that level of consistency that we talked about, I think that creates a lasting pipeline. You've got to be likable, you've got to be relatable, but within that, good looks and funny jokes aren't the only thing that get things done for people or earn you business. So, to me, it's a grassroots. How am I affecting change or adding value to this client? Which is how am I making money or making them money or preserving their wealth?
It's a good perspective. What does success feel like to you, not just in numbers, but like in a personal level?
The thing that I love about this business and where I exist in life is the ability to control when I work, who I work for and with. At some point early on in a career, you are taking all the deals you can get and all that. And, eventually you get to a place where there's a certain clientele, there are certain people, there are certain quality of deals that you want to accept the work with. That to me is a good component of success. And, look, as a detriment to my business, I work less, having my 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old daughter. Old me, you can catch me on the phone all the time, anytime. I'd pride myself that I'd throw that around. I outwork people. I'm not that person anymore. You can catch me during what we call first shift, which is a normal day. But 5:30 to 7:30. Like, I'm going to cut you off on the phone and we can talk after.
Sure.
What we call second shift. So a lot of late hours. But to me, the ability to be with family, get deals, rely on a pipeline of deals, and have some comfort knowing that great market, decent market, trash market, I can figure out how to take a piece of that pie all day.
I had one more question. I just forgot it. Let's talk about, if you look back to your 21-year-old, like, Evan Lyons self, what counsel or advice would you give to him getting in the business? Just coming in. If you go back in time.
Yeah. Don't take your foot off the pedal in that 2016 year.
Did you think that lesson was valuable though? Did it?
No, I
step on it.
That's why I hesitate. No, I think that was a good learning experience for sure. You're only as good as your last deal, and I do this, and it helps define success. So I would probably just restate that being able to sleep at night and have a good reputation is a hell of a lot better than the money you could make on the opposite side of the fence. And so it's something that has always stood out to me. I've lost deals because I won't do something, or I get repeat business because I treat people right, and because it's important to me to afford a good reputation. And so just reaffirming that, I think, is substantial.
So for the young audience that might be considering getting into the commercial real estate space, or maybe they're debating between commercial, residential, or any sort of niche in real estate in general, if they're looking at their own personal identity and like natural skill sets, what recommendations would you have for them? What do you think that it is that they need to have within themselves to succeed in your world in the commercial real estate space?
you've got to be able to put yourself out there. You've got to be able to hear no a million times. I think that a key component in our business is self-discipline. You have to. It's easy to be able to sleep in or not go to that thing or not make those 5 extra calls or cut out early. Now, again, I cut out early these days because of family, but there's a level of self-discipline that I think you have to have in order to hold yourself accountable and make sure that you're doing the things that either you told your senior what you would, or that the partners expect of you, your clients expect of you, and really the self-discipline is, are you lying to yourself, right? So I think that's a really important factor. And there's a level of people skills that I think you got to have.
Communication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know there's a lot more data analysis in commercial as well. Doesn't it easily learn with the systems and processes, or does someone need to naturally be gifted in the realm of numbers and finance?
No. No, that's the cool thing about this business is, frankly, it's the people skills, the grit, outworking, the fire under someone's ass. All of those things are going to make someone a lot more successful than understanding the intricacies of the underwriting. At the end of the day, Excel, multiplication, addition, and subtraction will do just fine. And so it's really about recognizing opportunity, being a student of the investment game, which companies are good, seeking opportunity, which areas are great. Those are things that the intangibles are the things that will make someone successful.
Love it. Evan, thanks, brother. We've been going for over 2 hours. Thanks for taking time. Great content, good deal stories. How can people reach you if they want to get a hold of you? If they're looking to...
Very active on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Evan Lyons. Encore Real Estate Investment Services is our company. We've got a website. We're based out of Orchard Lake out of West Bloomfield. And cell phone, baby, 248-535-0354.
And then we'll get your info. We'll put it in the description below. Guys, I'm James Danley. It's the Bulldogs Podcast. Thanks for stopping by. Please leave your comments below. What were your top 5 takeaways? Do you guys want to see more stuff in the commercial real estate space? What do you want us to do interviews on? Till next time. See you soon. Thanks.